I'm actually nervous. This is odd. Yeah. You may want to close your eyes. Start with an apology. That's actually the title of the poem. Says to the young woman in the library, with apologies. You're right, it was rude, and we hadn't been introduced. It's just that all the people I now love used to be strangers, and you've got to start somewhere. Hell, even my mother, when she was your age, didn't know me. This is for a friend of mine who I knew in university, and I don't know anymore for reasons which will become obvious. It's called The Death of Freddie Dolmas. Said Freddie had cancer, the curable kind, but he wouldn't go to the doctor because he was afraid they'd laugh at his sagging pecs and flabby thighs. So Freddie waited. He died waiting. This one, when I find it, is the result of visiting a battlefield which had become a tourist attraction. Waterloo. This is the only long poem I have. Said, when the smoke had cleared enough so you could focus a camera, there was a monument and a busload of Japanese businessmen with narrow ties and broad smiles, who, because they did not have time to look, took pictures and kept to themselves. When the screams of the dying had been dead a decent interval, there was a souvenir booth and a troop of American tourists who picked over the grounds like chickens looking for a juicy morsel of the past, where their children, untended, tore off tops of earth and pretended they were bullets. After the tattered emperor had fled the field by carriage, there came an ice cream vendor and a seated circle of English schoolboys who giggled into their tuna sandwiches at the funny Japanese, dreamt of red uniforms, and wished they had brought blankets, for the grass was still wet with morning. Then the dew turned to blood. The Americans stopped their picking and, sensing a crisis, fumbled for their traveler's checks and their children, while the Japanese took pictures and giggled at the funny English schoolboys who stood up in an effort to purge the red from their naked, soccer-scarred knees. This was unfortunate, for the first volley of cannon fire took their heads clean off. The busload of Japanese businessmen were cut down in a charge of household cavalry that swept past La Haye Sainte, on down and over the ice cream vendor, leaving broken chalk ices and melted vanilla fudgies in its wake. The Americans ran to the souvenir booth and there, barricaded behind a wall of picture postcards, held on for several hours until their children ran out of ammunition and they perished in hand-to-bayonet combat with a regiment of the Imperial Guard. After the smoke had cleared, the screams died, and the emperor fled, night fell, and Belgian peasants came out to plunder the dead. Stepping daintily over the corpses, they relieved them of their tuna sandwiches, their traveler's checks, and of course their Nikon cameras, whose lenses, like single dead eyes, glowed dull and blue in the moonlight.